Scenario 5. Entertainment and Hobbies. Real Scene 3. Aeronautics Commercial Aviation. Leonardo da Vinci studied the flight of birds when developing engineering schematics for some of the earliest flying machines in the late 15th century AD. Anonymous. My goal. Once I complete Scenario 5, I'll understand how to use the verbs going and will with the future tense. I will also understand how to use modal verbs to express necessity and suggestions. I will also learn to use second and third conditionals. The reading material will introduce the principles of aeronautics to me, and I'll learn a little about the development of commercial aviation.
Introductory Questions. 1. Do you know the history of aeronautics? 2. What is the most famous airline in your country? 3. Do you know about airline alliances?
Introduction. Aeronautics is the science and practice of aircraft navigation. It is also used to refer to the engineering discipline related to the design, construction, and operation of aircraft. In relation to astronautics, aeronautics refers specifically to vehicles designed to travel within the atmosphere, while astronautics refers specifically to vehicles designed for travel outside of the atmosphere. Aeronautics is sometimes divided into various disciplines. Aerostation is the design, construction, and operation of lighter-than-air vehicles such as balloons. Aviation is the design, construction, and operation of heavier-than-air vehicles such as airplanes and helicopters. In common usage, however, the term aviation is used as a synonym for aeronautics, and sometimes even to refer to aeronautics and astronautics as a whole. Early aeronautics. One of the earliest scientists to study aeronautics was Leonardo da Vinci. He studied the flight of birds when developing engineering schematics for some of the earliest flying machines in the late 15th century. Modern aeronautics. Modern aeronautics is primarily conducted by independent corporations and universities. There are also a number of government agencies that study aeronautics, including NASA in the United States and the European Space Agency in Europe.
Listening. Conversation. Listen and practice with a partner. I'm excited. I'm going on vacation next week.
Great! Where are you going?
I'm going to the Bahamas. I'm going to relax on the beach and party every night.
Sounds like fun.
I'm going to travel on one of those big planes, A777-200.
Oh, I've never flown on one of those. Are they safe?
Of course they are. In fact, the 777 is one of the safest planes in the world.
Sounds very exciting. I'd like to fly in that plane.
Why don't you come with us? We have plenty of room.
Do you mean it? I'd love to. Thanks, Joe.
Grammar structure 1. Using simple future tense with be going to and will. Simple future tense has two different forms in English: be going to and will. Be going to is used to express a general prediction about the future. For example, I am going to travel to Mexico in the winter. Be going to is also used to express a plan. For example, he is going to spend his vacation in Hawaii. Will is used to describe something that the speaker will do voluntarily. For example, I will send you the information when I get it. Will is also used to express a promise. For example, I will call you when I arrive. Will can be used to express a general prediction about the future. For example, the year 2222 will be a very interesting year.
Writing. Complete the conversation using be going to and will. Have you made any plans for the holidays? Yes, I need a break. I go to Aruba. That sounds great. How long are you going to be away? Be away for 2 weeks. When are you leaving? I don't know exactly. I probably leave at the end of the month. Where? You? To stay? To stay at the Sunflower Hotel. That sounds like fun. Maybe I go to the casino. You rent a jet ski? I'm not sure yet. Maybe I rent a jet ski if it's not too expensive.
History. Airline. An airline is an organization which provides aviation services to passengers and/or cargo. It owns or leases aircraft, such as airliners, which supplies these services and may form partnerships or alliances with other airlines for reasons of mutual benefit. Industry overview. An airline company may consist of a single airplane carrying mail or cargo, or a full-service international airline operating many hundreds of airplanes of various types. Airline services can be categorized as being intercontinental, intracontinental, regional, or domestic, and may be operated as scheduled services or charters. The variety of airline companies, their operating scope, and the routes they serve makes analysis of the airline industry somewhat complex. Nevertheless, some patterns have emerged in the last 50 years. The general pattern of ownership has gone from government-owned or supported to independent for-profit public companies. This occurs as regulators permit greater freedom in steps that are usually decades apart. This process has not been completed with all airlines in all regions. The demand for air travel services is derived demand. That is, it depends on other things: business needs for cargo shipments, business passenger demand, leisure travel demand, and all these needs are influenced by macroeconomic activity in the markets under study. These patterns are highly seasonal and often day of week, time of day, and even directionally variable. Notwithstanding these demand patterns, the overall trend of demand has been consistently increasing. In the 1950s and 1960s, annual growth rates of 15% or more were common. Annual growth of 5–6% persisted through the 1980s and 1990s. Growth rates were not consistent in all regions, but areas where deregulation provided more competition and greater pricing freedom resulted in lower fares and sometimes dramatic spurts in traffic growth. The US, Australia, Japan, Brazil, Mexico, and other markets exhibited this trend. The airline industry is cyclical. 4 or 5 years of poor performance are followed by 5 to 6 years of gradually improving good performance. But profitability in the good years is generally low, in the range of 2 to 3% net profit after interest and tax. It is in this time that airlines begin paying for new generations of airplanes and other service upgrades they ordered to respond to the increased demand. Since 1980, the industry as a whole has not earned back the cost of capital during the best times. Furthermore, in bad times, losses can be dramatically worse. As in many mature industries, consolidation is a trend, as airlines form new business combinations ranging from loose, limited bilateral partnerships to long-term multifaceted alliances of groups of companies. Since governments often restrict ownership and mergers between companies in different countries, most consolidations take place with the company's country of origin. In the US, over 200 airlines have been merged, taken over, or simply gone out of business since deregulation began in 1978. Many international airline managers are actively lobbying their governments to permit greater consolidation in order to achieve higher economies of scale and greater efficiencies. Early development of airlines in the US. Following World War I, the United States found itself swamped with aviators. Many pilots decided to take their war surplus aircraft on bomb-storming campaigns, performing aerobatic maneuvers for crowds. In 1918, the United States Postal Service won the financial backing of Congress to begin experimenting with airmail service, initially using Curtiss Jenny aircraft that had been procured by the United States Army for a reconnaissance mission on the Western Front. The Army was the first to fly these missions, but quickly lost the contract when they proved to be too unreliable. By the mid-1920s, the Postal Service had developed its own airmail network, based on a transcontinental backbone between New York, New York, and San Francisco, California. To supplant this service, they offered 12 contracts for spur routes to independent bidders. The carriers that won these routes would, through time and mergers, evolve into Braniff Airlines, American Airlines, United Airlines, originally a division of Boeing, Trans World Airlines, Northwest Airlines, and Eastern Airlines, to name a few. Passenger service during the early 1920s was sporadic at best. Most airlines at the time were focused on carrying bags of mail. In 1925, however, Ford Motor Company launched the Stout Aircraft Company and began construction of the all-metal Ford Trimotor, the first successful American airliner. With a 12-passenger capacity, it made passenger service potentially profitable. Air service was seen as a supplement to rail service in the American transportation network. At the same time, entrepreneur Jean Trippe began a crusade to create an air network that would link America to the world. He achieved this goal through his airline, Pan American World Airways, and a fleet of flying boats that linked Los Angeles to Shanghai and Boston to London. Pan Am was the only US airline to go international before the 1940s, and it quickly became a symbol of the potential of the American airline industry. With the introduction of the Boeing 247 and Douglas DC-3 in the 1930s, the US airline industry was generally profitable, even during the Great Depression. This trend continued until the beginning of World War II. The first countries in Europe to embrace air transport were France, Germany, and the Netherlands. France began an airmail service to Morocco in 1919 that was bought out in 1927, renamed Aerospatiale, and injected with capital to become a major international carrier. In 1933, Aerospatiale went bankrupt, was nationalized, and became Air France. The German airline industry began with Lufthansa in 1926, which, unlike other airlines at the time, became a major investor in airlines in the developing world, founding Varig and Avianca. German airliners built by Junkers, Dornier, and Fokker were the most advanced in the world at the time. The peak of German air travel came in the mid-1930s, when Nazi propaganda ministers approved the start of commercial Zeppelin service. The big airships were a symbol of industrial might, but the fact that they used flammable hydrogen gas raised safety concerns that culminated with the Hindenburg disaster of 1937. In 1919, the Dutch airline KLM was founded. It is the oldest carrier operating on its original name. The first flight transported 2 English passengers from Schiphol, Amsterdam, to London in 1920. Since the Netherlands is a small country with few potential passengers, KLM has depended heavily on transfer passengers and was one of the first to introduce the hub system to facilitate easy connections. United Kingdom's flag carrier during this period was Imperial Airways, which became BOAC, British Overseas Air Corporation, in 1939. Imperial Airways used huge Handley-Page biplanes for routes between London, the Middle East, and India. Images of Imperial aircraft in the middle of the Rub al-Khali being maintained by Bedouins are among the most famous pictures from the heyday of the British Empire. Development of airlines post-1945. As governments met to set the standards and scope for an emergent civil air industry toward the end of the war, it was no surprise that the US took a position of maximum operating freedom. After all, US airline companies were not devastated by the war as European companies and the few Asian companies had been. This preference for open skies operating regimes continues, with limitations to this day. World War II, like World War I, brought new life to the airline industry. Many airlines in the Allied countries were flush from lease contracts to the military and foresaw a future explosive demand for civil air transport, for both passengers and cargo. They were eager to invest in the newly emerging flagships of air travel, such as the Boeing Stratocaster, Lockheed Constellation, and Douglas DC-6. Most of these new aircraft were based on American bombers such as the B-29, which had spearheaded research into new technologies such as pressurization. Most offered increased efficiency from both added speed and greater payload. In the 1950s, the de Havilland Comet, Boeing 707, Douglas DC-8, and Sud Aviation Caravelle became the first flagships of the jet age in the West. While the Soviet Union bloc countered with the Tupolev Tu-104 and Tupolev Tu-124 in the fleets of state-owned carriers such as Aeroflot and Interflug. The Vickers Viscount and Lockheed L-188 Electra inaugurated turboprop transport. The next big boost for the airlines would come in the 1970s when the Boeing 747, McDonnell Douglas DC-10, and Lockheed L-1011 introduced wide-body or jumbo jet service, which is still the standard in international travel. The Tupolev Tu-144 and its Western counterpart Concorde made supersonic travel a reality. In 1972, Airbus began producing Europe's first commercially successful line of airliners to date. The added efficiencies for these aircraft were often not in speed, but in passenger capacity, payload, and range.
Writing. Question. Questions for discussions. How can airlines be categorized? What kind of demand is air travel service? How many airlines have gone out of business since the deregulation began in 1978? What kind of planes were used for mail services? What is the name of the German airline company? Which companies did Germany establish in the Third World? What is the oldest airline in the world? Name some of the wide-body planes.
Grammar structure 2. Using modal verbs to express necessity and suggestion. Modals or modal auxiliaries are helping verbs. They are used to convey many different kinds of meaning, two of which are necessity and suggestion. Function. Necessity. Modal. Have got to. Example. You have got to get your passport in time for the trip. Have to. You have to visit the duty-free shop in the airport. Must. You must go through customs before boarding the plane. Suggestion. Let's explore the waterfront before we leave. Why don't we visit the Gold Museum?
Avianca is an airline based in Bogotá, Colombia. It is Colombia's national airline, operating international scheduled services as well as domestic and charter flights. Its base of operations is El Dorado Airport in Bogotá. History. Avianca is the third airline ever to operate in the history of aviation, after KLM of the Netherlands, and the second one to fly in the Americas after Chork's Ocean Airways. Currently, Avianca holds the title as second oldest airline in the world, still operating under its original name, second to KLM. The airline was established in June 1940 after the merger of SCADTA and Servicio Aéreo Colombiano. Over the decades, Avianca expanded their routes to include all South America, as well as Central America, the United States, and the U.S. territory of Puerto Rico, Mexico, and parts of Europe. Avianca's fleet has included the Boeing 727, Boeing 707, Boeing 747, Boeing 757, and Boeing 767. They have since retired the 707s, 727s, and 747s, but have added the Fokker 50 and MD-83s to their fleet. In March 2002, Avianca combined with its domestic subsidiary SAM Colombia and merged with ACES Colombia to form the SUMA Alliance, and operations began on May 20, 2002. On March 21, 2003, Avianca filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection with debts of $446 million, and following the grounding of ACES Colombia in August 2003, SUMA was officially dismantled the following November. Continental Airlines placed a bid to acquire Avianca and combine it with its Panamanian unit, Copa Airlines. On November 17, 2004, the newspaper El Tiempo reported that this bid was superseded by a proposal by Group Ocean Air Group Synergy, owned by the Brazilian entrepreneur Herman Efromovich, to invest $63 million. The creditors backed this plan with more than 99% of the vote, and the Bankruptcy Court of the Southern District of New York approved it. Ocean Air would take 75% of the company, and the Federación Nacional de Cafeteros, National Federation of Coffee Growers of Colombia, would retain 25% ownership, down from 50%, with the option to sell out completely after 3 years. Valores Bavaria, the owner of the Colombian brewery Bavaria, would sell its 50% holding. The pilots, who presented their own letter of intent to the court on November 16th, objected to the Ocean Air plan. After several discussions with the pilots, an understanding was reached between the investors and the interested parties. The Ocean Air plan was eventually approved by debt holders and confirmed by Judge Alan Gropper of the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, and the airline was able to emerge from Chapter 11 protection in December 2004, with Herman Efromovich as its newest owner. In March 2005, Avianca reported that it had achieved significant net profits at the end of 2004, about $132 million, contrasting with heavy 2003 losses, about $135 million. The new restructuring process, together with cost-cutting measures, saved the company $70 million. Efromovich's investment, debt restructuring, and partial debt payments placed the company in a positive economic position as the year 2005 began.
Grammar Structure 3. Second and third conditional. The second conditional structure is used to talk about imaginary situations and the consequences. For example, if I had a car, I could visit my friend. But the truth is, I do not have a car and I cannot visit my friend. The second conditional structure is also used to talk about imaginary abilities and the consequences. For example, if I could fly, I wouldn't need a car. But the truth is, I cannot fly, and so I need a car. Use the third conditional to talk about past events. Use it to describe what could have happened, event B, as a result of something else, event A. However, neither event A nor event B happened. Therefore, the third conditional describes hypothetical, imaginary situations. For example, if I had been at home yesterday, I'd have got your phone call. But I was not at home, and I didn't receive your call. The third conditional is often used to criticize. If you had worked harder, you wouldn't have failed the test. But you didn't work hard, and you failed the test. Or it can be used to express regret. If I hadn't spent all my money, I could have bought a computer. But I spent all my money and I couldn't buy a computer. Or it can be used to express relief. If we'd taken that route, we'd have been stuck in the traffic jam for hours. But we didn't take that route and we didn't get stuck.
American Continent Airways, 2004 to 2009. On December 10, 2004, Avianca concluded one of the most important and ambitious reorganization processes, undertaken after filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection, by obtaining confirmation of its reorganization plan, which was financially backed by Brazilian consortium, Ocean Air Synergy Group, and the National Federation of Coffee Growers of Colombia, allowing the airline to obtain funds for $63 million in the 13 months following withdrawal from C-11. Synergy Group owns and operates Ocean Air, which services around 30 cities in Brazil, as well as VIP, an airline in Ecuador, Taxi Aero, a charter line in Brazil, and the recently acquired Huayra in Peru, as well as TurbServe, dedicated to the maintenance of turbines. In 2009, Ocean Air and VIP Ecuador were rebranded as Avianca to consolidate as one airline, following the ambitious expansion plans of the airline. Avianca, TACA Alliance, 2009 to 2013. The merger of Colombia's Avianca and Salvadorian-based TACA is the latest sign that consolidation in Latin American airline sector is picking up. The newly formed holdco, which would be controlled jointly by Avianca and TACA, instantly became one of the region's largest airlines after Brazil's TAM and GOL, with 129 aircraft and flights to more than 100 destinations. In November 2009, the airline's chief executive, Fabio Villegas, announced that the airline was looking to replace its Fokker 50 and Fokker 100 aircrafts with newer aircrafts of 100 seats or less. The 10 Fokker 50s and 15 Fokker 100s were operated on flights shorter than 1.5 hours. Aircraft manufactured by Brazil's Embraer, Canada's Bombardier Aerospace, and the Airbus A318 were considered for the replacement. In December 2010, the airline made the decision to retire the Fokker 100 aircraft in 2011 and replace them with 10 Airbus A318 leased from Gekas from 2011 until 2018.
Star Alliance from 2012. On November 10, 2010, Star Alliance announced Avianca and its merger counterpart, TACA, to become full member in mid-2012. Due to Avianca's entry into Star Alliance, it has ended its codeshare agreement with Delta Airlines and began a new codeshare agreement with United Airlines. TACA had been code-sharing with United Airlines since 2006. On June 21, 2012, Avianca and TACA were both officially admitted into Star Alliance. Avianca Holdings SA. Avianca and TACA changed their image to the Avianca brand on May 28, 2013, in order to have only one brand in the aviation industry. On March 21, 2013, at the annual general meeting, the shareholders approved the change of corporate name from Avianca TACA Holdings SA to Avianca Holdings SA. Research Spot. Look for more information about 1. Famous air accidents. 2. Other airline alliances. 3. Military aircrafts.